All right, so this is going to be the fourth lecture in this series, and this is going to be about how the rabbis have been so weirdly accurate over the centuries. And a couple disclaimers before I start. For one, this is just science, and I'm going to explain how they've been doing it. And once you know how it works, you'll see that you yourself can do it if you're, daring enough to do what it takes to be able to do what they're doing. That's the first disclaimer. The second one is this is the fourth lecture in this series. So if you haven't seen the first three, you should before watching this one. And if you don't, then just be forewarned that if you just jumped right into this one, it's going to seem a little strange. But in the first three, everything that's covered is 100% simple science. Just simple, observable science that anyone can see, anyone can understand, and you can, like the few references that I do make, you can just look up in like 5 minutes and like internalize all of it. So anyway, it's all just, like I said, it's just middle school science, very straightforward. So I wouldn't want anyone to watch this and think that like this is what I talk about and like I'm just into like sort of out there topics and stuff. My whole entire foundation is the most nailed down empirical science you can ask for. So, with that said, I will start to explain how it is that the rabbis have been so weirdly accurate for centuries. All right, I'm trying to draw Earth over here. I have to set this all up though, because you can't just jump right into something like that. You gotta build up to it. Okay, so, all right, so I'm going to cover a few effects that we observe in nature that, don't make any sense if you don't understand more about what's going on. Things that involve some sort of like invisible phenomenon. Let's see if I can draw a bird here. All right, so we have birds that fly very vast distances across the earth, and they navigate across vast oceans like the Pacific Ocean. And the Pacific Ocean is so enormous that if you're approaching Earth from space at just the right angle, you will only see the Pacific Ocean at just the right angle. That's how ridiculously large it is. You would think that this entire planet was a water planet, so just gargantuan ocean. And there are birds that can fly all the way across that, so literally around the Earth, and know exactly where they're going. They can, they can thread a needle and like land right on a dime across all of that distance, like thousands and thousands of kilometers and miles. And they're basically doing it, as far as we can surmise, by using the magnetic field of Earth. But up until recent, and they might be using something else that we don't even know about, but up until recently, if I said the word the magnetic field of Earth to you, you would think I was crazy. You would think I was like, if I tried to like explain it to you and like give you examples, you would think I was some kind of like failed wizard or something that didn't know what he was doing. It's only recently that we've only been able to start to comprehend and study, things like magnetic fields. And so all this time, that's been invisible and, like a mystery to us. And yet, things have been exploiting that, not just birds, but like, it's probably like most animals can sense it, but like birds can do phenomenal navigation with it, and some land animals too. But, so that's one thing that we can't observe, but is real nonetheless. And only now can we measure that. But there's also a phenomenon sometimes called spooky action at a distance, or quantum entanglement. And it's where you can take two molecules and like laze them and entangle them together, and then you can separate them by, any distance, and then you can once they've been entangled, you can change one, and then the other one will change exactly the same, and it'll do so. I should probably put this out here so it's more obvious. So you can like spin one or move one, and the other one will make that exact same change, like a solenoid, like just matching the actions of the first one. And it'll do this instantaneously over vast distances. And it'll do this instantaneously over vast distances, and it'll far surpass the speed of light. So we don't know how fast it's going, but it's way up there in the superluminal velocities, like way faster than the speed of light. And we have no idea how that works. Like, there's like something funny going on that we just do not understand, some kind of like invisible connection there. So that's another one that we can't grasp yet. We also have what's called the galactic rotational curves, and this is where when galaxies formed, there was some source of gravity within them that was more than the gravity from all of the observable mass. And so once they reached their equilibrium, they ended up spinning way faster than they should have been if the only gravity in the galaxy was just from the mass we can see. So here again, and we call this dark matter because basically we have no idea what it is and what's going on. And so this is another effect that we can see now and we can observe now, but we still can't explain. It's still a mystery to us. And then also you have, I don't know if I want to get too into this, but all of these galaxies are like, oh, that's a terrible galaxy. Like when we look out in space right now, all of these galaxies are like flying apart from one another really fast, and the rate that they're like flying apart from one another is just getting like faster and faster and faster, and that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would they be flying apart from one another but getting faster, like constantly getting faster? And we call this like the redshift or the cosmic redshift or something. I was going to explain that, but that's probably good enough. So it's this accelerating expansion of the universe, and this doesn't, make any sense to us. So we just kind of came up with this idea of, what do we call it? Dark energy. That's one theory for what's going on with that. But again, it's just a mystery that we don't really understand. I'm not too crazy about that art there. So anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that there's a lot going on, and we don't quite yet have a grasp on it. And another phenomenon, which is very real, is the twin effect, where when you have twins, a very common thing that happens with them is that if something's going on with one of the twins, the other one will sense it. Like if one is, like, let's say in distress, for example, the other one will actually sense that is happening. Like I have a friend, for example, who has a twin brother, and when they were just like little kids, his brother was at his grandma's house, and he got like tangled up in the sheets in his little bed, and he was basically like asphyxiating. And my friend like woke up in the middle of the night, and he was like, "Mom, Jesse's in trouble." And like he woke his mom up, and like he just like would not let it go, you know. And she's like, "It's a bad dream." He's like, "No, Jesse's in trouble." And like almost sounds like Lassie now that I say it. Like, Jimmy's in the well. But like he would not let it go, so she finally called their grandma, and she went and checked, and like sure enough, he was like tangled up in the sheets, and you know, he was like turning blue. but they saved him, so he was all right. But this is the twin effect, and like this is a thing, you know, it happens, it's real, and it's very similar. I draw it up here because it's as if there's some sort of like connection between them that we don't understand. And for us to like, the reason I'm saying all this is that we do not have the liberty to look at unseen phenomenon and just presume that it's not real. And you know, like stuff that would be considered sort of metaphysical, it's actually a much more old-timey, sort of uninformed position nowadays to pretend as though this is the only dimension and, you know, there's nothing else going on. And that's actually more old hat, you know, like this kind of really strict materialist worldview, especially like the one that, you know, this view that like you just live, you die, and that's it, and that, you know, nothing else could possibly be going on. Like we don't know that, and we know enough now to know that there absolutely could be other things going on, you know. And let's see, what else? Like the Mothman prophecies, for example. You know, it's like that's an interesting phenomenon where, oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. I was gonna say it's kind of like, you know, if you're a really hardcore materialist atheist, you know, for all you know, people in the future could have like figured out time travel, and then like they can like record everything in the quantum field, and so they can have like a record of your consciousness at the moment of death and at every point before that, just like stored in the quantum field of space forever, you know. And it's like, we don't know, you know. It's like, what can they do in the future? I don't know, you know. Maybe they can time travel, who knows. But I'm just trying to make the point that there's a lot going on, and there could be a lot more, you know. And the reason I mentioned the Mothman prophecies is because, you know, that's an interesting phenomenon too, where it's as if something with a perspective which can see the future is like communicating back, and, you know, just like sending messages and sometimes warnings and, you know, whatever. And you know, that's a whole subject unto itself. And like, why would someone with the perspective of the future like be sending a message back? And maybe it's just so that we can be aware that they are there, because like one of the things that we observe with that is that, you know, people can get, like, we'll just call it a message sent to them, basically telling them about a future event that is going to happen, but only giving them enough information to be able to confirm it once it happens, and not giving them enough information to be able to know precisely how it's going to go down and therefore stop it. So it's like, you can, you know, like the example they give in the movie is like, this guy gets the message, Denver 99, and he's like, what does that mean, Denver 99? And then the next day, like, a plane goes down in Denver with 99 people on board. And then as soon as he sees that, he instantly knows what it meant. So he has enough information to verify it once it happens, but like not enough to precisely predict and stop it. You know, it's kind of like the Greek Cassandra's curse or whatever. But really the point of that would just be not so much that it's necessary to like give us warnings or whatever, like, because that's kind of like crude and primitive, that like we should need warnings given to us like that in such a weird way. It's not about that. It's more about just the fact that just making us aware that there is a there, or that these things can be known, and that we can take comfort in the fact that, you know, future things can be known. But anyway, these are just you know, some examples to ponder and think about, and you know, especially if you're coming at all of this from like a really strict kind of old school materialist, you know, atheist worldview, if you will. So, and that's not the best setup, but not as eloquent as I would have liked it to be, but that's my sloppy setup for where this is all going. Okay, so that's a setup for the next thing I have to just talk about, and this is a personal anecdote, but it's still good data, and it helps set up for all the other stuff, and helps to illuminate why I ended up researching the things I did. I'm trying to draw a metal axe over here. All right, so when I was in high school, I was in bands and stuff, and had some legit hair, and it wasn't like an Yngwie Malmsteen or anything that like I could write and record and stuff. But anyway, I was at home in my bedroom / studio, chilling on the couch, and I was playing guitar. I didn't have a bed in my bedroom, I just had a couch, so I could have more room for studio equipment. But so I was at home, I was playing guitar in my room, my studio room, and yeah, that's actually a good way to put yourself into a trance. You know, a lot of musicians know that, because a trance is basically induced by something that like is just interesting enough that you want to follow it, but then it's also like really boring at the same time. So it's like that perfect balance of like interesting and boring, kind of like a, you know, a movie that, or like a documentary movie that's like, and hopefully not like this, but you know, like a documentary movie that's, you know, kind of interesting, and you're like, oh, that's an interesting topic, but then it's like also kind of like tedious, and just like, it's like that perfect combination to put you into a trance. But anyway, not that any of this is about trances, but so I was at home playing guitar, leaned back. I was a lot more reclined than that actually, but anyways, I zonked out for just like a few seconds, and in those few seconds, a lot happened. And nothing like this had ever happened to me before, or really since, but in those few seconds, I'm gonna see if I can draw this. I perceived in those few seconds, like suddenly my vision became ultra crystal clear in high def, like so high definition, it makes like normal waking life look like the foggy sort of hazy dream. It's like if a dream is over here and it's like all foggy and hazy, and then normal waking life is kind of like, you know, whatever. It's like just kind of like the limits of human perception. Like this is like super crystal clear, like you can zoom in on the flower, you can see like, you can zoom in on every little cell if you wanted, and you can zoom into the cell and just keep going deeper, and there's just like all this detail. But anyway, there's like no way I can use words to convey it, but like this happens to people sometimes, where they have this vision, this ultra clear vision in their mind's eye, and I just call it like having a vision, but when you do have this vision and see like this, there's no mistake that you're perceiving something that is like hyper real. It's like way beyond just like normal waking life. But anyway, like, so that happened to me while I was playing guitar. Just like zonked out for a second, and then suddenly I could see like crystal clear, and I was like up in the air. Like I perceived that I was up in the air, like floating in the air. And see if I can draw this. I perceived that I was like up in the air, like floating in front of a car, and like looking like down at an angle through the windshield. So this is like me looking like down at an angle into the windshield, and there was like a young woman driving the car, and she had like a little flower dress on or something, and like a little like pearl necklace, and she had like her hair in that kind of like old school curly style that they used to do back in the day, where they would like put curlers in their hair. But like she was in a modern car, which was weird, because she was a young woman in a modern car, but then she had like this like old school style. But I only saw this for like 2 seconds, literally 2 seconds, like 1,000, 2, 1,000, blam. And then right at that moment, it was like a nuclear bomb went off, like right here into my face, and just like this huge explosion. And it was like blinding white light and deafening loud roar. And like I thought it was gonna cause me serious physical damage. Like I thought it was gonna like blind me and blow my eyes out the back of my head. And the sound was so powerful that it's like, it goes beyond making you worried about your hearing, and you start to wonder if like your internal organs are gonna be like destroyed by the sound, because it's just so powerful. But so that like jolted me awake over here, and I thought a bomb went off, and like I literally thought like World War III was starting or something because of that. I thought that like because I had a sliding glass door over here, and then a balcony outside, and I thought that like a nuclear bomb had gone off, and it was so bright that it had lit up my balcony, and then that light had like reflected into my room, lit up my entire room, reflected off of the ceiling, because I was like laid back, reflected off of the ceiling, and then like went through my eyelids and still almost blinded me. Like that's how bright I perceived it, or I thought it was, you know? And so like I jumped up and I like ran out onto my balcony, and I was like looking for the nuclear bomb, you know, because I thought like Skynet was popping off or something. And I didn't see anything, because I was looking for a mushroom cloud, but I didn't see anything. So I like ran back inside and out of my room, and I saw my roommates, and I was like, dude, I was like, what was that? And they were just like looking at me like zombies, because they were watching TV. They were in the trance state too. I was in my trance state, they were in their trance state. But they're all zombied out in front of the TV, and they were just like looking at me, and I was like, I was like, how are you so zombied out that you did not like react to that bomb going off and that blinding white light? But they're just like, what? And they're like looking at me like I'm crazy too. So I was like, okay, whatever. And I like ran out of the house, out the other side of the house, and to see the other horizon, to like see the mushroom cloud. I'm trying to find where the mushroom cloud is, you know, because a nuke just went off. And like I see people like walking their dogs and kids playing and stuff. So it's like, then I'm just starting to realize like, okay, that wasn't in the real world. That was like, I was like, Hansel, you've never actually been to Mount Vesuvius? Maybe this is all in your head? No, but seriously, like I was like just starting to realize that was only a perception of my consciousness and not like the real world. And like that in itself was completely blowing my mind, because I was like, how is that even possible that that could happen? But anyway, you know, it's like you're young and you don't have time to think about stuff like that really, so you're just trying to survive, working for the man. So like the next day I'm like back at work. It's supposed to be my hat there. Like back at work in my apron, flipping burgers. I was working at a fast food joint. I don't know why I need to draw this, but I feel the need to draw this for some reason. But anyways, I had a fast food job at the time, and I got the call while I was at work the next day that my grandma had just passed. And then I got to go home, and then I found out later that what happened was the day before, on this day, she was on her way to the hospital to see like my little nephew being born. And she was like all excited driving to the hospital. And there was this EMT who was late for work, who was an ambulance driver. But he was in his own personal vehicle at the time. And he was like trying to rush to work. And since he was an ambulance driver, he was just like running red lights because he was used to it. And like he thought he had a knack for it. But anyways, he ran my grandma's red light, and he just like annihilated her car instantly, just with his massive truck, like going like flying down the road. But anyway, it was just like obliterated her car basically. But it wasn't until I found out that like a few days later that like I just kind of was like slowly starting to realize what had happened. You know, like this crazy experience of consciousness I had was like connected to that. And then I was like, oh, that was her in the car. And like I didn't recognize her because she was young, but it was her same style. It was like the funny little way she had her hair and all this stuff. And also, like there was no like weird subconscious thing. Like she was healthy as an ox, you know. There wasn't like some funny unconscious reason to suspect she was nearing the end or like, you know, whatever. And even if there had been, like it wouldn't have had anything to do with cars, you know. So like I legitimately perceived something that was real, but I did it remotely from hundreds of miles and kilometers away. Just, you know, somehow perceived it like the twin effect, except from like grandson to grandmother. And so that's what launched me on starting to, not like in that moment, but that was like my wake up call to where like I started to like investigate in, you know, succeeding years you know, these sort of phenomena, about, you know, the unexplained and all this sort of thing, but always like investigating it with the utmost prudence and scientific rigor. And so this is all to build up to the next thing I'm going to talk about, which is what I like to call temporary death experiences, but what the world likes to call near-death experiences, or NDEs, near-death experiences. That was coined by Raymond Moody back in, I think it was the 70s. And I'm not the biggest fan of the term. I like temporary death experience better because it's more clear. It's like very clear what you're talking about. But he's the one who, if you've ever seen in the culture, I'm sure you have seen, like people talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. That all comes from him, Raymond Moody, and his research. He's the one who figured that out. Might as well write his name, give him credit. Oh man, I'm pretty sure this is how you spell it. Sorry if I spelled that wrong, Ray. But anyway, So these are temporary death experiences where people will die for a while, and they will be dead, like clinically dead, or they'll be like undergoing brain surgery, and they'll have to have like their brain like made literally dead without the blood flow for a little bit, or like something like that, or like a neurosurgeon who himself had meningitis and had all of his brain activity completely cease for a while, just total death, brain death. And in these moments when they should be perceiving nothing at all, they have the most ultra vivid, real experience of their entire life, like I was describing with that super high def, like high fidelity resolution. And these are a big thing nowadays. If you haven't heard of them yet, there are like thousands and thousands of these testimonies, both in interview and in written form, and you can study them to your heart's content. It's actually really enlightening to do so, but this is no small thing. Like, this is a big deal. And just as a side note, before I forget to mention it again, the light at the end of the tunnel is the same light I saw when I basically was witnessing my grandma transitioning. And the reason it was so powerful, and I'll justify this later, but like the reason it was so powerful is because we are in like basically the lowest dimension you can be in, where the energy is really sparse. I call this the energy impoverished dimension, where we're just desperate for energy, we're like, we have to like inhale gas into us and like drink liquid and eat solids constantly just to get enough energy to survive, to just continue existing. We're like right at the edge of oblivion. We're up against the nothing in the never-ending story. And but when we have a little sneak peek into a higher dimension, the energy levels are so much more intense, just the basic background energy, that just a little sneak peek of it from like this perspective is like that. Like the energy is like a nuclear bomb in your face. Like if they don't modulate it for you, and it's just blam, it just hits you. And to us here, it feels like a nuclear bomb. So it's as if in higher dimensions, they have like the power of many nuclear bombs in like every little speck of space, But anyway, so that's what the light at the end of the tunnel is. And what I saw, you're just basically getting a sneak peek at the basic background energy of one of those higher dimensions. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. But as far as the temporary death experiences go, basically what happens is people will die for a while. They'll have the most real experience of their entire life. And this is happening in like countless, this is happening to millions of people worldwide, and we're getting the actual data from not just the metadata, but the actual testimonial data and interview data and questionnaire data from like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And from that, we can do studies, and we can see the patterns, and there are very, very clear patterns. And people are seeing like the same experience. And one of the examples I give is, it's as if they're all going to Hawaii, but they're all sort of going there from a different direction and interacting with different aspects of Hawaii, in this other realm that they're perceiving during their death experience. And as if, like, let's pretend like there's a Hawaii in this other realm, this very paradise-like realm, and it's as if they're all perceiving like different aspects of it, and they're all giving you their story of what they saw and what they experienced, and they'll be like moderately different features and stuff, but you can tell from all of them that they're all talking about the same thing, like they're all looking at the same thing from like just like slightly different angles. But you could go on and on and on and on and on about these patterns that they observe, but the patterns are very, very clear and like very distinct patterns. And once you learn those patterns, you can actually know a considerable amount about like what I call like the base dimension, where, you know, consciousness really originally originates. And I realize how like wild that sounds to scientists, but like I said, this is real research, and everyone can and should go and check it out. That you know is like, if you're skeptical about this and you think, oh, it's just like an oxygen deprived dying brain and all that, that's a perspective from someone who hasn't actually done the research. Like, no one who does the research into this stuff comes away with it like with the utmost confidence that there's nothing going on and that there isn't some sort of inexplicable phenomenon out there that we still can't, you know, haven't figured out. But it's not nearly as woo-woo as it sounds. You know, as in previous generations this would have sounded. Let's see, so there's so many things going on, it's hard to know even where to pick up. Okay, so one of the points I wanted to make with these temporary death experiences is that the patterns they see are very, very extensive. Like, they're very detailed and advanced patterns, and it defies the explanation that these are just illusions that we've been selected for through adaptive selection. Like, you could go way into this, it's a huge discussion, but like, you could say, for example, that like we've somehow been selected to have like a paradise-like illusion if we die temporarily and come back, so that it can like make our group, our tribe, feel better. And that would be a good argument. If you were going to argue against this, that's the argument you would want to go with. But that one doesn't work. It's a good start, but it doesn't work because the patterns we see in these things are just like way too advanced. There's just way too much going on for like all of that like huge complex detail to be selected for, you know? If anything, the selection would be like really generic and all that. And that would be a weird thing to select for too. You know, usually nature doesn't select for like something at the edge of death so much. You know, like a little bit, but not really. You know, it's like nature's worried about what's happening while you're alive. It's not like, generally speaking, it's not like selecting for, you know, some experience of consciousness you're having like right at the very end, you know, like right before lights out for your body, you know. But anyway, I'm not doing the best job explaining this yet. Maybe I'll, you know, do other talks where I dive deeper into just like these individual topics like this. But I just wanted to cover that real quick and point out that these are a real phenomenon. It's happening to millions of people worldwide, and no one should discount this stuff without actually looking at it. Like, if anyone ever just kind of like dismisses all of this out of hand, that is not a prudent position to take. The prudent position would be to like actually look at this and then, you know, try to dismiss it, but not to just, you know, oh yeah, that's all crazy, that's all woo-woo, that's wishful thinking. Oh yeah, that's another point I was gonna make. This will be the last point I make about these, is that of these like countless thousands of people that are having these experiences all the time, we can tell from the testimonies, from the recorded testimonies, that the vast majority of them are indeed being like completely authentic, just utterly authentic. You know, it's just people who experienced something beyond belief, and it like blew their freaking mind, and then they're just like telling you about it, you know, kind of like someone on the evening news, where like, you know, the evening news like has this like magnet to always somehow find like the last person who should be on camera. And then they just like get that person and they're like, yeah man, I saw the whole thing, you know. It's kind of like that, and it's just people telling their like this insane like experience they had. And when you look at it, you don't even need any background or training to be able to instinctively tell that like the vast majority are 100% authentic. And then there's some stuff around the edges, like, but we're so spoiled for data in this field, we don't got to worry about the stuff around the edges that's like ambiguous or you're not sure or whatever. And then of course there's people like me out there with backgrounds in like, you know, psychology, mentalism, interrogation, kind of Darren Brown type stuff, where we can see the inauthentic cases from a mile away. Like we can smell it like coming. We don't even, before we even see it, we're like, yep. And so, and it's funny because like of the few people who have like tried to submit testimonies that are inauthentic, what they don't realize is how many people like me there are who can like immediately identify the non-authenticity of their testimony. But anyways, those people are very few and far between, and I hope things get better for them. But the vast majority of the cases we see, you know, with these temporary death experiences are absolutely authentic, and you don't even need any training to be able to see that for yourself. And one of my favorites too is, I'll just throw it out there, if like you want like a funny example of where to start. Oh man. Sorry, Vinny, if I spell this wrong. If you want like a good place to start, you've never seen these before, this one's awesome. Vinny Tolman, like he was dead as a doornail, like going into rigor mortis for almost like 2 hours, and his experience was like massive. You know, he had this enormous experience while he was out, and it's really fascinating. But anyway, so these are another layer here. So I gave you my anecdote, I mentioned these. The next thing I wanted to point out is the even more hardcore research. How do I want to set this up? Let's just set it up like the mysterious way. There are people who, well, let me come at it like this. There are universities, major universities, even one of the ones I attended, who have been studying people that we would call like extra sense mediums. And I guess I could just write that. Extra sense mediums. And these are people who basically, sort of like the twins and like the bird, they perceive information. They can when the time is right, they can perceive information which is not coming to them locally. Basically, they're picking up on something that is, I just call it impressions, that is coming to them remotely, somehow, through some mechanism we're still not entirely clear about. You know, maybe through their pineal gland, and you know, we're not 100% sure on that. But somehow these people are picking up on remote information, and major universities have been studying these people for a long time. It doesn't really make the headlines for obvious reasons, you know, because you know, they know how much ridicule they would receive, because you know, we tend to be really tribal when we're in groups. But this nonetheless has been going on for a long time, this research, and it didn't start with modern universities. It actually started in its most hardcore form. I'm gonna write this over here. Well, I guess I'll write it here. Research of these people started almost 2 centuries ago with a fellow by the name, and I'm expecting you to memorize this name. Not really. Hippolyte Léon Denizard de Reval. This fellow, or as he was much more commonly and much less fun to say-ly known, Allan Kardec. And this fellow started scientifically researching these people almost 2 centuries ago. He was a professor and a scientist in France, and like a tutor and stuff. And that was back when like table turning and seances were starting to get like big and popular and fun. People would have like seance parties, and he was like really incensed by it and like offended that like people would put their faith in like stuff like that. So he kind of wanted to debunk it, and but what happened, I'm skipping over a lot, but like what ultimately ended up happening is he kind of had a weird experience like I did, and not like that style of experience, but a strange experience, multiple strange experiences nonetheless, that made him aware, just like this, that there's like more going on. And since he was a man of integrity and truth and honesty, he acknowledged that there is indeed, not tribalism, but like a man of true science. He acknowledged that there is indeed more going on. And so what he did was he actually started studying these people, and what he would do is, how do I want to do this? We'll draw Hippolyte over here. He would send, and if you don't know, the scientific method is all about repeatability. Like, we have to make sure that something can be repeated by literally anyone who uses the same setup, and that they can, this is empiricism. This is like how we verify something is repeatable and consistent. And so what he would do is he would get a question, and I'm like glossing over a lot of detail, but like he would get a question, and he would send it to a bunch of different extrasense mediums that had no idea about one another, and who were all like geographically separated and stuff. And he would get their answers back, and he would confirm that he found through this research that he would get the answers back from them, and some of them were women, but he would get the answers back, and he would see that he was getting like a consistent answer from all the real deal mediums, and it would be like an answer that was not the least bit intuitive, that someone would just like guess or try to intuit or whatever. Like, it would be like very unintuitive, like bizarre answers, but then he would get the same thing from a bunch of different people, and this is how he scientifically verified this almost 2 centuries ago. And like, no one gets taught about this guy. Like, this dude's a legend, like Nikola Tesla, and like, people just, like, he's barely even known. But they did make a movie about him, which is pretty wild. I didn't realize that, like, there was enough people to even do that. But like, it's not a well-known thing, but there is a movie of him out there, and it does a pretty good job at kind of giving you a sense of what that was all about. But it leaves a lot out, but it's a good movie nonetheless. But anyway, so I could talk forever just about like him and like this stuff, because he he did this for years and years, and he got like volumes and volumes of information. And if you're crazy like me, you can sit there and read through these like these very difficult, these very dry technical records of all the stuff he found. So I ended up doing exactly this before I even knew about him because of what happened to me. I started identifying people like this because nowadays, oh, that's what I forgot to mention. Nowadays, there are missing persons units and like detective units and stuff that employ these people to help them find missing persons. And they don't go around talking about it. Like, it's a very like personal, private, professional thing that you'd only know if you really got to know them and they were comfortable with you. But like this is not just mumbo jumbo. Like these people are employed helping like real life, police units and stuff. In addition to being studied by universities and also people like Alan Kardec studying them as well. But what else? Oh, that's right. So I unwittingly picked up in his footsteps and started doing exactly this because it's obvious, this is like common sense. It's like you just ask a bunch of independent, separated individuals the same exact questions and see what answers you get. It's like a single blind study, and a lot of the questions you ask them too are things like you don't even know, like real big questions about like existential questions and about mysteries that mankind has yet to solve, or whatever. It's like stuff that even you don't know. So in that sense, it's kind of like even a double blind study. But but the way I located my subjects is there are, generally speaking, this is like one of the easiest ways, not the only way, but this is one of the easiest ways to do it. There are organizations that will vet them already, and it's like the Family Forever Foundation and the Windbridge Foundation, and there's a university in merry old England that even like trains them too, where they in order to be a medium, what you have to do is you have to receive your impression and leave your conscious mind completely out of it, or your own personal mind. You have to receive the raw information and transmit that to the recipient in its pure form. Like you can't let your own mind get involved and try to figure it out or understand it, or like put a big hat on and like your was that Karnak the Magnificent, and try to make it into like an ego thing or something. Like you're literally a medium. Like you're a medium of transmission. So you get the information and you transmit it. You leave your own mind out of it, even though it makes you feel insane, because it does. Because the giver of the information to them does this on purpose, to where the information is something that will not make sense to them, and it'll be something like really weird, like don't forget to put the turtle underneath the fireplace or something, which just sounds like insane, and it makes these people really uncomfortable. These people. So this is part of the challenge of their work. They'll get the message and it'll be something like really bizarre like that. But the good ones that are good at what they do, because they've either been trained or they have like the experience and wisdom to know that this is what you do, they will just transmit the message as is, even though it feels wrong for them. But then the recipient, the person who was supposed to get the message, will just like immediately like start laughing or crying or whatever, because they'll know exactly what it meant. And the giver of the information to them knows exactly that. So anyway, but that's like the university that trains them, the traditional one in England, it like teaches that sort of stuff. I believe it's Arthur Finley, if I'm not mistaken. And also, I'll just write it in here because just to try and like strengthen my point here, that this is not just silly mumbo jumbo, wishful thinking, whatever. These people are no joke, and like this fellow George Anderson in New England, he's the world's most scientifically studied medium, and he's hilarious. But he's an example of like someone who's like really hardcore as far as his abilities, and the more legitimate a person is with this, the more humble they are. That's like one of the things you'll notice with that. But anyways, one of the ways, like I said, you can find people like this if you're interested, is like organizations, like I said, like the Family Forever Foundation or the Windbridge Foundation, if that's still in operation. But this is what I did, and I went around and I found mediums who had been tested and vetted and certified and all this sort of thing, and then I just like gave them questions, like queried them, and got their responses. And I did this for a while, for years. And I got their responses, and then I like compared them, and I found things that I don't even know if Allan Kardec found. This is kind of a side note, but it's kind of fascinating because like Allan Kardec, he would get the answers back and it would be all the same answer. Like he would get each person's answer back. I'm trying to draw papers here. Because this was back in the day when you had to like send written correspondence and all this stuff. And he would get them all back and compare them, and he could tell like they were all describing the same thing, like the same weird thing. But what I found is if you give, he might have found it, but like I never saw him explicitly state. I might have fallen asleep trying to slog through one of his volumes when he mentioned something like this, but I don't know if he ever found this. But what I found is that if you give him a question that's too complicated, what you'll get back is like separate pieces, and sometimes you'll get like carbon copies. Like you'll get one piece from her and one from him that are like duplicates, and then one from him and him that are duplicates, and then one from her and him that are a different duplicate. And so you'll have like, I don't know, pairs, or depending on how many participants you're using, unbeknownst to them, they have no idea. They're involved in a study, but which helps it be a blind study. But you do it anyway, because who cares? It's for science. So you'll get back like carbon copies, or like pieces in general, and it's only when you assemble the pieces that you see the full answer. And then it makes the hair on the back of your neck stand up, because it's like you were just given like these separate pieces, and like, yeah, like gives you the heebie-jeebies almost, because it's like in the movie Contact, where they were given all those separate pieces like transmitted through space, and it was only then that only when they put it all together that they saw what the message was. But you can do that if you want. Whoever you are, whether you're a regular person or a researcher or a student or a professor or whatever, like anyone can repeat this. That's what science is. It's repeatability, it's empiricism. And this is what I did for a long time, like chasing mysteries and things like this, and just simultaneously trying to confirm stuff. But so this is a thing, this is real. If you don't believe me, you can check yourself, and look into it. And again, like if you are interested in this topic and you like broach this with another person and they just kind of like dismiss it, if their dismissal isn't coming from like a really robust background and they're just kind of like, it's like give you some like line about a dying oxygen deprived brain or something, it's like they don't have the first clue. God love them, but they don't have the first clue what is going on out there. Like their information is so outdated, it's not even funny. They're like way behind the curve. And really, not to get too far into it, but that response is just another form of tribalism and all this sort of thing, like programming, where you perceive that your tribe is against this and that your tribe is out there and they love you, and you imagine that this is the case and that you're being loyal to them and it's helping you earn points with them. And I don't know, it's just like human psychology. But let's see here. All right, I needed to give myself some more room over here, but I did want to definitely make that point there about how this phenomenon of the extrasense mediums can be empirically studied, researched, and verified. And the fact that like really hardcore professional organizations out there have been doing precisely this, including people like missing persons units who do not mess around and do not have time to mess around. So, it's like we're the bird, we're sensing something and we can't explain it yet. We can't, we don't have all the details yet, but just because we can't explain it yet doesn't mean it's not a real scientific phenomenon. And part of the reason too, something else I wanted to mention is like, ever since I was little, I could tell that our world was like severely messed up. And so I just said, well, how do we fix it? It's obviously like very fallen and distorted. So I did the natural thing and I said, okay, well then how do we fix it? And but when you do that, you don't have the luxury of living in delusion or illusion. Like if you're gonna fix something, you have to know how it actually works. Like if you're gonna fix a car, you can't just like open up the hood and dump in a bunch of metal scraps and then shut the lid and try to drive off. Like you can't live on wishful thinking like that. Like I said, you have to actually know how the system works, what the rules are. Even if you don't know necessarily all the hows and the whys behind the rules, you still need to know what they are. So I just wanted to mention that point that like, in our pursuit of, and in my pursuit of trying to figure out how to like fix the world, I haven't had the luxury of not being, extremely empirical, So I just wanted to make that point right there. And like, I don't do any of this for myself, by the way. Not that like I'm the subject of any of this, but like my only design is to like, in all of this is to just like fix what's wrong with the world. Because, you got like little kids and like gentle things out there that are, should only be being treated extremely well, and that's not happening, and so that needs to be fixed. And it doesn't matter if I'm alive to see it, it still needs to be fixed. So it's just that simple. But I thought it would be funny because I remembered one more anecdote that I would just throw out there to try and, again, like strengthen my case that even if you still think I'm completely off my rocker at this point, I wanted to throw something else out there just so I can, query you on whether you think I'm being imprudent by the conclusions I'm drawing from this stuff. But at one point, when I was doing this research, I wanted to basically get messages, if you will, from my dog who had just crossed over. And so, like any good nerd father, what I did was I employed the help of many of these people, and usually when you talk to these people, like if you want to go prove this stuff to yourself. Oh, that's another point. That's now I remember what I was trying to get at the first time. If you do think I'm nuts, and when I'm saying all this, you don't have to just sit there and guess. You can test it. You can go to these people yourself. You can have a session with them, or a sitting, or whatever you want to call it, and just allow what happens to happen, and you will get what you need to get out of it. And I do dare say, you will not be so confident at the end of that if you've done your due diligence to get a good one like George Anderson, and like the ones I'm talking about, the certified ones. And I am very serious about that, because not just anyone out there who like markets themselves as this is necessarily, for real, unless maybe like they have like a plethora of just really amazing reviews from a neutral third party, and not reviews on a site that they control, but like hosted by a third party reviews, and lots of them. But anyway, if you do your due diligence and you get some good ones, and it's not even that hard, honestly, especially nowadays, and you do have a session with them, you will not, like I said, I do dare say that by the end of it, you will not have the same level of confidence and naysaying what I'm saying. You will, at a minimum, be like stopped in your tracks and like hesitant from stuff you experienced during that. But anyway, to finish that second anecdote, the second and final anecdote I was going to throw in here, I did contact a bunch of them because I did want to get some messages from my dog that had recently crossed over, and just see what would happen. And usually you're not supposed to say anything. You just go in, you don't say anything. You go in, you sit down, or nowadays you can call them or whatever online, teleconference. However you're doing it, and it's usually best to not say anything. You just go in and let what happens happen, and it'll pretty much always tend to be what needs to happen, we'll say. But it's like the more you try to control it, the more it'll like mess things up, Like you can try and steer a little bit, but anyway. But what I did is I didn't want to mess around during this period, and I definitely wanted to get messages from my dog. And so I did say to all of these mediums that I contacted that I wanted to hear from my son, and that's all I said. And I knew that they would make the natural assumption that I was talking about a human child, and that human child would be deceased. And that's good, because I wanted them to be biased sort of in the wrong direction, just to see what would happen. But I'm not going to share all of those stories. There is one I will share, because one of the young women I found was like a very sweet little Korean girl. And she was a twin. She had a twin sister. And but she was using her abilities to help people and all this sort of thing. And I was talking with her. I was like in the session, and I had only told her that I wanted to receive impressions from my son, and or I wanted to get messages from my son. And so she did what they do, what the trained good ones will do, and she just started relaying like cause of death, symptoms surrounding death, all that stuff, so that they know that they're on the right track. And so she's going through all that stuff, and then maybe about 5 minutes into it, she just like stops, and she starts getting like really apologetic. She's like, I'm sorry, I don't mean to disrupt the flow, but did you have or did your son have a little black dog? and oh yeah, that's what she said. She's like, did your son have a little black dog? Because that's the only thing he's consistently showing me. And I'm not gonna do her like accent or whatever, but like that's what she was saying. And like as soon as she said that, like I just lost my composure. I started laughing so hard. And because I lost my composure, I just like spilled the beans. Like I told her, I was like, that's actually him. And as I said that, she just kind of like slowly started to realize what I meant by that. And she was like, oh my God, I didn't realize I could talk to animals. And she was just like completely mind blown. And she was like, he's so smart. And like it was, the whole thing was hilarious, but she was kind of perplexed in the build up to that moment because she was giving me all these like cause of death things, and for a human child, they're like really bizarre. Like if you thought you were talking about a human child, it's like the weirdest thing ever, but it's not until you realize it's a dog that it makes sense, you know? Like a veterinarian would see those descriptions and be like, oh yeah, that's these breeds and whatever. But like for a human child, it's like the weirdest thing ever that you've never even heard of because it's just so off the wall. But she was like baffled up until the point where like I spilled the beans. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe I can talk to animals. So that was like a huge moment for her too. But anyway, and again, like I did my due diligence. This is a total freaking stranger, and even if it wasn't, there was no possible way, like even a private detective would have been able to know the things that she knew. And like, so I would pose this to a true skeptic, not a contrarian. A contrarian is just contrarian, but a true skeptic who actually wants to, you know, argue the opposite position in an honest way with integrity. I would pose this to a true skeptic, especially if you think up until this point, like I've just been cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. How should I interpret all of this stuff, especially like stuff like that? You know, like how do I explain that? You know, that like, you know, some utter and complete stranger is just like figures out that I'm like talking about a dog and like stuff like that, and like knows exactly like cause of death, and then like has other like very distinct information specifically like that only like he would know or something. So yeah, like, you know, if you want to dismiss all of this, I would be interested to hear how, you know, I should interpret stuff like that if, you know, it's not what it appears to be. But anyway, I don't want to get too off track on that. Everything I've been talking about so far in this has been to build up to the point where I can talk about this. And I'm going to now explain why it is that the extrasense mediums have that ability and how you can get that ability too if you want it. I don't mean that to sound like an infomercial, I'm just going to give it to you. But so the vast majority of people who have that ability have it because they have either had a temporary death experience or near death experience, or they have been subject to. So the reason that the vast majority of people that are extrasense mediums do have that ability is because they have indeed died for a while, or they have been subject to torture, not prolonged chronic torture, but like an extreme acute event of literal torture. And what this does, if you die for a while or you're subjected to extreme torture, what it can and often does do is it'll like fracture your veil between the worlds and like breach that septum in you know, between the dimensions in your head. And there's like a very small percentage of people that have extrasense mediumship who just have like some kind of genetic thing going on, but that's extremely rare. The vast majority are just people who have been dead for a little bit and come back, or they've been like literally tortured. And people since very ancient times have picked up on this in the ancient mystery schools, and like the Celts, for example. I'm gonna try to draw a Stonehenge. The Celts are one of them. The ancient Egyptians are another one. Actually, that's not a very good drawing, is it? In like the Eastern traditions, like Buddhism and that sort of thing, are another one. I don't know if I can draw like a meditator super quick, just like someone sitting, put the hands together there. But so these are just a few examples, like the Druids and the Celts, even though those were separate people technically. These are like some of the ancient mystery schools, and what they would do is they would accept initiates into them, and then they would torture you. They would put you through an event which was very torturous, and the point of that was, like I said, to fracture your veil between the worlds. Let me see if I can... Oh, that's funny. I went to like write on it and it just like started erasing it instead. But death experience. They didn't usually tend to like try to kill people and bring them back, but like almost. Like they would subject people. Sometimes I believe they would. These guys would try that, but sometimes it would push you so far into the you know, realm of torture, if you will, that like people would die. But I was gonna draw a Druid here, like in a Celt and or a Celt. Like for example, what these guys would do, these ancient mystery schools, one of the things they would do was they would seal you in a dark tomb, completely cut off with like no light, no sound, and before they would seal you in, they would actually sew you into a burlap sack so that like you were like physically in extreme distress. Like it was like physically uncomfortable. It was like itchiness times a million. And oh, that's the other thing. These guys would also employ sensory deprivation. So it wasn't just torture, it was also sensory deprivation. Because if you use sensory deprivation, you can basically like reduce the amount of torture you need to cause this to happen. And so that's why they would seal you in a tomb like that. These guys would do that too, like seal you in a tomb, in a dark tomb. And then like one of the things they would do is they would like sew you into a burlap sack. So it's like itchiness times a billion. It's like crazy uncomfortable. It's like physical like torment all over all of your skin, like in a claustrophobic little sack in the absolute dark. And they would leave you in there for quite a while, sometimes like days at a time. But these guys, one of the things they would do too is they would like seal you in a tomb and then like expose you to some sort of like, I think they would do like freezing conditions or like other sort of like really like painful, torturous conditions. But these guys in the East tend to go the meditation route. If you meditate for a yoga class, it's just peaceful. If you meditate for months nonstop, being forced to stay in that position, it's torture. And the fact that you are sitting in silence is the sensory deprivation component to that. So this is a form of torture when you do it for extended periods. And if you ever make friends with some real deal bona fide Eastern monks and stuff. You can see in their eyes all the pain that they've gone through. But yeah, that's another way to, another mystery school initiation, essentially. Whether or not the practitioners of it are consciously aware of it, or they've just like inherited it and repeated it. That's what that is. And so this is how you make an extrasense medium. A lot of the mediums, people who have mediumship abilities now, are people who like died as like a child or something and came back, or like they like drowned in the swimming pool or whatever and were brought back. And or like another thing that happens, and I guess I'll kind of just give this away right here and now. Another thing that happens is mothers will commonly be overwhelmed by the stress of giving birth, and they will separate. Like they're in an acute phase of torture, and they will separate out. And when they do that, because a lot of women in time would actually die in childbirth, but when they do that, it doesn't just crack the veil open for that woman, it also does it for her baby that has at the same time. It's like a interesting sort of like connection there, where it causes the baby to have that veil cracked open too. And part of why this is so stressful for women is because we're not meant to lie on our back and give birth to a baby. We're meant to be in the water and have gravity on our side. She's underwater here. And it's funny too, is like you can go and have your birth like this, you have your delivery like this in a dolphin area, and you can even pay to do this nowadays, I believe. I'm pretty sure they're still doing this, but the dolphins will actually come and help you give birth, which is crazy. Yeah? And just like, it's like highly suggestive of some kind of like shared past or something. Maybe they're like just waiting for us to remember. But this is how we're supposed to give birth, in water with gravity assisting us. And the water, is helpful, so your baby can come straight down and they're just like buoyant, or like just above the water, so that you're getting like the full benefit of the gravity assist. You're like just right above the water, like positioned to like where maybe it's like right here. So again, you're getting the full benefit of the gravity assist. This is how we're supposed to give birth, and we're not supposed to do stuff lying on our back like that. We're supposed to use gravity to our advantage. And it's the same for delivering a baby. And a lot of indigenous women in various parts of the world are still doing this. Not necessarily in the water, because they don't necessarily have access to water, but like they'll just go out in the bush by themselves and like squat down, deliver their baby into their hand with the gravity assist all by themselves. There's no screaming, no yelling, no distress, none of that. And like they do it like it's nothing, they just squat down in the brush, deliver their baby by themselves, and there you go. So this idea that like pregnancy or birthing has to be torture is this is way wrong. That should be a terrible experience. But that's funny, because that's how I was born. I was born in water like that. But my head was at like a funny angle, and that is what caused my mom extreme distress. And she separated while she was giving birth to me. She would like went up to the roof of the room, which is like a very common thing. They go to the corner, and then they can see everything in like ultra high definition clarity. And like they can see through walls, and they can see into other rooms, and like they can verify later that like with the neighbor that they saw, because I was delivered by midwives in like a pool of water. But you can like see what's going on in like the other like the neighbor's house and stuff. And you can then later go and like verify stuff with people, and it's part of the reason people who have you know, detachment experiences where they separate, they can go and verify these things later. But this actually happened to me, and where my mother separated while I was being born, and I didn't even realize until I was finishing the first book about human origins that is precisely why I had that experience where I saw my grandmother passing, and none of my siblings had that same experience. So of course they just imagined that I was crazy because, you know, it's like, well, why would I get it and not them, you know? And you know, you just kind of like assume things about people, like, oh, you're just looking for attention or whatever. But like I would care to get attention like that. But I had that epiphany, and it's the most obvious thing in the world too. Like I should have known that already, but I just never thought about it before that moment. And I had a live experience while I was writing the book, and I just like wrote it into the book live as I was realizing it. But yeah, that happened to me, where my mother separated while she was giving birth over a pool, and that is why I had that experience where I could see my grandmother passing, and I just wanted to throw that out there so it kind of helps my story not seem as insane, you know, and like you can see like the causality of it all. But anyway, this is how you create people with mediumship ability, even if it's just a teeny tiny little bit where they can perceive the passing of someone while they're like drifting off into a trance, you know. And it can be, it's like anything, it can be to degrees. Like some people it's just like the tiniest little bit, and some people it's like raging, like intensely. They can like massively get impressions across the veil, and it's not as fun as as it sounds. And to fulfill my promise, I told you if you wanted to do it, you could become a medium too. But like I said, it's not for the faint of heart, because this is how you do it. So if you want to do it, you can, but there's a price to be paid. But anyway, that's how it happens. Like 99.9% of the time. There's a few people where it's like a genetic thing, but like most people, that's not the case. But that's how we can do it. And this whole entire thing has been building up to the answer to the question of how it is that the rabbis have been so uncannily accurate for so many centuries. And now that I say that, you can probably get a sense of where I'm going with this. The rabbis have been, and the Jewish people in general, have been exposing themselves to torture. They've been being tortured. And that is why you've got so many of these rabbis going back millennia that have like actual real deal extrasense mediumship abilities. And what's funny is they don't even know this. So this is going to be like a revelation for them as well. But can you still read that? Well, you know what I wrote there. Got a little overexcited with my erasing. But that makes it look all rowdy, you know, it's all like an album cover, like you can barely read it. Like punk rock, torture. But anyway, so the Jewish people have been being tortured for thousands of years now. And I don't know how to set this up the best, but they're receiving this torture as little babies, and this torture is coming from circumcision. I'll just say it, when you circumcise a little baby, you are cutting a piece off of their body, and we are not meant to have that happen to us, much less as little bitty babies. That is a massive shock to that little baby's nervous system, and we're not supposed to be doing that. That's literal baby torture, and it's a brutal but effective way to create an entire race of mediums, basically people with extrasense mediumship ability, varying degrees. It might be just barely in some people and then like really strong in others, but this is why you have, and I'm not even going to write the word circumcision because I don't like that word, but I will write the covenant, because the circumcision comes from the covenant of Abraham, where he formed that covenant with God that all of his descendants, the boys, would be circumcised. And it's kind of like the thing with Moses and the burning bush, which you should have looked at if you cheated and tried to jump ahead in the lectures just to this one, where God tells Moses to like take his sandals off before approaching the burning bush because the ground on which he is standing is holy. But in reality, it's also like a massive safety issue that he needed to have his sandals off before he approached the bush, lest he be struck. But it's a similar sort of thing where like the tradition will have one reason for why this is the case. It'll just say like it's the covenant with God, it's a sacrifice or whatever, but there's another layer, or there's multiple other layers to it. And one of them is that this covenant has been turning their males into extrasense mediums for thousands of years. They have been putting their little sweet babies through the terrible mystery school initiation process for almost innumerable generations. But that's the answer right there. That's where that comes from. And like I said, now that you know how it works, you yourself are at liberty to do it yourself. Find some sort of process that works for you, and do that if you're froggy enough to do that. But that's where that comes from. This might seem a little weird because it says that God is the God of love, but then you've got stuff like this where you've got thousands of years of baby torture, and so it's like, how do you square that circle? And that's a big, tough question to get into. Not impossible, but it's involved, and there's like increasingly deep layers to that answer. But with Abraham, he came out of a pagan world, and in the pagan past of Earth, everywhere on Earth, people would sacrifice their children to their perceived gods, and to like give them better crops or like stop the earthquakes or whatever. And the reason that they would kill their children and imagine that that was appeasing the gods was because it basically traces back to the fact that we're a very successful species. So we overpopulate an area, we max out the resources by being very fruitful and multiplying, and then that leads to war because there's only so much to go around. So you end up fighting, and then like too much war creates a bunch of toxicity in the culture, a bunch of post-traumatic stress disorder, and then that gets passed on to little children, And when that stress and abuse gets passed on to little children from like just like severely damaged war veterans and stuff, and and just the people who had to survive through that era, who are all like massively traumatized psychologically, men and women alike, and then that stress gets passed on to little children, and then those children grow up wrong. Basically, whenever you deprive a child of something, especially a mammal child, of something it's supposed to have as a little baby, it spends the rest of its life craving that thing that it didn't get, and it also doesn't advance like emotionally past that stage of development. So when you take that thing away that it needs in its development over here, it stays at this level emotionally. Like, it doesn't get past that. And that's why you see a lot of behavior in adults that it seems like it's below their level of maturity. And this is like most people alive. They like, a part of their natural maturity was like sabotaged, and so they never like advanced, and so they're just like stuck at that level in that way, like that one piece of them, not their whole entire mind, but like that piece of them is like stuck back there. I guess I could like draw that. It's like we're supposed to go through these like stages of development as a mammal and as a child, and like, but if you don't get something you're supposed to get, like if it's just like not given to you, then like that part of you doesn't advance past that point, and you just like stay at that level until something can compensate. But if you have to compensate after the fact at some point, or like a child is like just like straight up hurt or harmed or damaged, it takes roughly 10 times as much energy in the opposite direction to compensate for that damage. And the worse the damage, the more the compensation factor needs to be. And some damage is so bad that never can there be like 10 times as much in the other direction. And that's part of why it's so important to just take care of children properly, how they're supposed to be taken care of. But anyway, so that's one part of it. But the first part of it, like I said, is if you take something from a child that they're supposed to get, then they will spend, and it's not compensated for, then they will spend the rest of their life craving it badly, that thing that was taken away from them. And if it's a child who sadly is in an abusive environment, then the thing that is being taken away from them is power. They are being made into a victim, and if they are deprived of power, then they will spend the rest of their life craving exactly that, power. And when you crave something like that, you basically get high when you get it. And because it's like that graph of addiction, it's the same thing, and this is where the addictions start. Like a normal person, a properly cared for person who was nurtured as a child the way they were supposed to be, just kind of like sits at like neutral most of the time, like barring any extraneous influences or whatever. Their emotional state is just kind of like hovers around neutral. But like someone who wasn't treated right growing up, they just kind of like stay down here the whole time, like in pain. They're just like, their existence is pain, and so they just spend the rest of their life, unless something can fix that, they just spend the rest of their life craving that, and they can't help it. It's not a choice. It's that they got wired like that, and you can rewire, but it's not a simple, it takes a lot of force to rewire that, a lot of good force. But so you spend the rest of your life craving that, and if you were sadly an abused child, then you had your power taken from you. So you spend the rest of your life craving that power, and when you get it, ooh, you get high as a kite. And it's sad because this comes out in a bunch of like really weird ways, and a lot of them are not healthy, and like harming others. This is where this Schadenfreude, it's called Schadenfreude. This is where this comes from. This Schadenfreude means to delight in the harm of another, in another's misfortune. That's where that comes from. That's where Schadenfreude comes from. And this can come out in all sorts of ways. This is where sadism comes from too. That's another word for it, like the delight in the harming of others. That's where that comes from. It's very straightforward when you understand how, mammal biology and such. But so back in the day, when we were successful as a species, we multiplied, pressed up against our environmental limits, had to compete for resources, ended up having wars if we were like too fruitful and multiplying. Those wars, if they were excessive, they would turn into a toxic culture of abuse, like cycles of abuse. You get, a sadly abused kid grows up to be an adult who gets off on hurting others, sadly, then has their own kids, and, like I said, sadly, will oftentimes transfer that to the children. They will abuse the children because they have a compulsion to do so. It's like one of the biggest tragedies of all time, but and this is like vampirism. You become if you delight in the harm of others, you have a really bad vampire infection within you. Not an incurable one, but you do have one, and they will transfer that vampiric infection onto others, usually by abusing a kid. Causes this to the kid, keeps the cycle going until it gets properly fixed with things like sunlight. But anyway, so in ancient times, this would become very normal, once we had become very successful, and then we would become warlike, and then this would become normal for us, and then we would project this onto our perceived gods, and we would just assume that our gods were like an abusive parent who delighted in the harm of us. And so in order to appease that god, to get them to stop like causing earthquakes and stuff, we would like do like sadistic, psychotic stuff to try and like make them happy, or what we thought was making them happy. And so people would literally kill their children, and so they would kind of get their own little like demonic, vampiric, Schadenfreude, sadism high from that process, and they would assume that the gods were also getting their high from that process, and it was sick. And as the story says, God told Abraham, "Nah, bro, don't do that," because in the story, Abraham tries to kill Isaac to appease God, or tries to kill his son to appease God, and as the story goes, like an angel like pops in. He's like, "Bro," he's like, "No, don't do it." And so like Isaac, his son, gets spared in that story sometime around the year 1 by some people's account. Abraham was trying to play stabby stabby cut cut, or what was it? Bernie birdie cut cut. But but then Abraham, he still has that like hardcore paganism programming, naturally. You can't blame him. He had that programming, and so he sees a sheep tangled up in a brush, and he's like, oh, I'll go horrifically murder that to appease God. And, God kind of does like a face slap, but, God knows, God and they, plural, God and they know, like angels, archangels, whatever, all of them. They know this is part of the process, this is a natural misunderstanding, But, so he goes and like sacrifices a sheep, a ram, and the divine, if you will, allows that. And there's a lot to say about that. One of the things to say about that, why they would allow that to happen, is when you get into this field of so-called near-death experiences, one of the unavoidable patterns that emerges that you see is that people will be very often completely removed from their body prior to the moment of death. And also, not just NDEs, but ADCs. This is when you speak to a medium, a real certified, legit medium, to someone who is crossed, and then they send information over, and then you confirm what they're telling you and all that. This is an after-death communication, and that's another realm of research. But through definitely the NDEs, and also massively through these too, in their own right, what we see is that people are very often just completely removed from their body before they feel any suffering at all, or it gets too bad. Maybe it'll just start, and then there's pop, they'll just take them out, so that they don't have to experience the worst elements of the death. And you might imagine why, that act of mercy would be performed. And I could go on and about that, but I'm just going to leave it at that people can and will be removed so that they don't have to experience the worst stuff, and so that their body will just be on autopilot during the actual death process. If they were driving a car, it'll just keep driving the car. They up there will control it, remote control it, so that it continues to do what it's doing. It's still fully being piloted, and it'll just keep on doing a very technical task. Or one story that I thought was amazing was a woman that was swimming, and she left her body, but her body kept swimming along in freezing cold water. That was how she was dying. But so if you look at the whole concept of sacrifice, and it seems brutal, it is, but we have to also consider that it can be being buffered in a way that we don't even see and we don't even perceive. But another caveat with that is that this is not an excuse to do sadistic stuff and be like, oh, it's okay, they'll be spared. I don't have to make ethical decisions. And because another thing we know is that when people cross back over, one of the main things that happens, usually it's one of the very first things that happens, is they have an entire life review. And not the thing where your life flashes before your eyes when you're about to die, but this is a different thing altogether. They have an entire life review, and they literally see their entire life, and they see it with their soul's brain, so they're able to perceive it all at once. And it doesn't make any sense to us as humans, but this is how they all describe it. They're able to see their entire life all simultaneously. And because our oversouls are kind of like genies from a lamp, but without the lamp, and they can just do stuff like that. But they perceive their entire life simultaneously, and they see all the good, bad, and the ugly. And they don't just see it, but they also relive a lot of it. And they don't just relive a lot of their life, they live the experience that other people had who are interacting with them. So, and it can even be like many degrees removed. So if like they did something that was like really nice to another person, they will actually live that experience as the other person. And or if they cause something to happen and like 30 degrees of separation later, like someone like really benefited from that, they will live the experience, that like pronounced, notable experience of that person as if they were them. Not that they are them, but they will live that experience of that other person. And if they did bad to other people, they will live that experience. They will suffer the suffering that they caused. And by people, I mean all sentient, conscious life that they harmed. If you did things that resulted in the harm to animals or children or whatever, you live that experience of that harm that you caused to that other sentient being. Now you can see it for yourself. But so I just wanted to make that point that like, and it's weird too because like they'll actually, the other side, far from judging you, they will actually try to comfort you during this experience. Like literally God will try to comfort you, and all of them will try to comfort you during this experience because it's so brutal. And the only one who will judge you will be your own, like only you will judge yourself. And if you've been like super gnarly and like not a nice person to like an extreme degree, like the big bad scary word of the universe is regret. Like you will feel hell in you. And you will, I don't want to go too far off into this because it's like a dark topic and it's not really what we're talking about, but you will actually you will remove your own self from the light and go to a place where you can just like feel that hell inside of you, and no one else is holding you there or trapping you there. It's just you need to take yourself to hell. So it's like, it's better to just like not be a terrible person. But again, this isn't me saying this. None of this is my own subjective stuff. This comes from years of research. You can verify it through this, or you can repeat what I did and Alan Kardec did, which is a much more laborious process than just like passively like absorbing this data. But any number of ways you can verify it, repeatedly verify it. But yeah, so I just wanted to point that out, that whenever the sacrifice of like the Old Testament and stuff was happening, it definitely was not necessarily as bad as for the recipient as it appears on our end. But also, that is never an excuse for us to, like a justification for us to do terrible things, you know. It doesn't work like that. But I did want to make that point. So that's the first point about sacrifice, that it definitely isn't necessarily the same for the experiencer of it as it appears to be for us. So the second point about sacrifice is that the whole entire point of it, like why it was allowed back then, sadly, was because, the reason this was a part of the process, not just allowed, but it was a part of the process, is to prove your sincerity, is to prove your conviction and how serious you are about your morals and all that, or what you're saying in your covenant. Like, that's the point of sacrifice. That's literally what the word sacrifice means. It means giving up something of value for a purpose. It's not sadistically killing an innocent being or child to appease some jacked up god. There's a point to it. And like, for example, like, in the messianic schools of thought, they have the concept of sacrifice, like sacrificing for the world. There again, that isn't to appease some jacked up god who has schadenfreude because that god used to be a little mammal child that was abused and now has like a lust for power. No, God was not a mammal child. That's a biological thing. That lust, that getting high off of like abuse. That's an animal, like a pathological state of an animal. That does not apply out of here. I'll tell you what does apply later, but that is not it. So that sacrifice is not to, like I said, appease some like mentally deranged, like petty little like whatever genie or something. The whole point of that is to there's a purpose to it. Like if there is a sacrifice and it is necessary, then there's an actual reason. There's like a utilitarian, logistical reason why that needs to happen. Like maybe that's the price that one must pay in order to come to a very fallen world and speak the truth in that fallen world. Maybe doing that is a guarantee that the powers that be in that world and just the darkness of that world will just attack you from all sides, and it will just be like torture and eventually like a very terrible ending or whatever for your commitment to try and bring light into that dark world. But the point is that there's an actual reason for the sacrifice. And when it comes to the Old Testament sacrifices, the whole point was for his brain and their brain. It was so they would get the message like very deeply ingrained in their mind that what they were doing was serious, like deadly serious. And it was to help them like lock that into their subconscious. And the reason this was even a sacrifice for them, like an animal, was because these were pastoralists. Sacrifice isn't about killing animals. It's about giving up something of value that you were going to consume anyways. So this to them was like you taking out your wallet, pulling out a big stack of 100s, and then just throwing it into your fireplace. And like that feeling you would get if you just like took out like a big like thick stack of 100s and just threw it into the fireplace. Like you would just like feel horrible. Like you would feel sick inside to do that. That's how they felt. Like this was very valuable. I mean, not only did their humanity kind of like cringe inside at this process, but like behind all of the other like trauma layers and stuff, but like the giving up of value of this was like very like very painful. Like I said, this is like you just or taking your smartphone and just like take it out right now and just destroy it right now without insurance. Like one that you don't have insurance on, just destroy it. And like, especially a new one, or go down, buy a brand new one and then just destroy it. Like and the way you feel that's how they felt. It's the giving up of something of value that you were going to use and consume otherwise, but completely giving it up. And that's part of why these were burnt offerings, and they would actually burn these after the sacrifice, because when they completely burnt it, it guaranteed that they were not using this for sustenance and calories. They were just completely destroying it. And that was ingraining within their mind the importance of their commitment to the covenant. So I just wanted to go through all of that about sacrifice and like what the whole point of that was, and how in the Old Testament, when you see it, like a lot of that gnarly stuff, it's worth noting that there's a whole other layer to that. There are multiple others, but definitely this other layer to those things where they aren't necessarily the same for the experiencer as what we see. And this isn't to appease some psychopath and deity floating around. This is a utilitarian purpose. And that leads me to I guess the final thing I'll say, I have like a never-ending story of things to say, but like I was gonna like say all kinds of other stuff about all of these subjects and stuff, but this has gone on for so long. I'm just gonna make one more point because it's a good like grand finale point. But part of I said this before. I said that a being, an elevated being above us, is not like, how would you even draw that? It's not like getting off on torture and stuff. It's supposed to be light. I don't know. Choose your favorite symbol. But an elevated being above us is, how do I build into this? They're not petty like us. Even you, when you leave here and you like wash away the earthness, I'm not saying this arbitrarily. Again, I've told you why how I've found all of these things and confirmed and reconfirmed all of these things. But like when you leave here, wash away the earthness eventually, or you like get back out of that darkness finally and then wash away that, you are only in like a super empathic state of high energy. You come from a very like high energy dimension, and you don't need any of you're not a perfect little saint, but like you don't have all like the like animal, weirdness, like programming and stuff. You wash that away. Yeah, there's a lot that connects to all this, but okay, like in your humanness, like as you look around at the world, when you see something that is beautiful, or like a beautiful sunset or something, you automatically love it. It's involuntary, an involuntary reaction. When you perceive beauty, you love it. I'll just write that. It's an automatic, direct reaction. Beauty leads to love. It's one and the same thing. But when you look around at the world, there's a lot of places where you do not perceive beauty, but if you were to learn more about more things in the world, like, I don't know, let's just put a rock here. You look at like an average person looks at the rock and it's like, it's just a rock. But then a geologist looks at this rock and the geologist sees beauty, lots of beauty, like way more dimensions than the average person is seeing. And that's because the geologist learned about the rock. And so this is basically what happens. Like when you gain knowledge and understanding of things, you slowly start to see wherein lies the beauty within things. And so the more you learn about the world, the more you see where the beauty lies in everything. That's why I call this like the nerd effect, because like, one of us, like we'll look at something that most people will dismiss and we'll just see like enormous beauty in something. And or like we'll get all excited about like some star cluster event that's happening, and other people will be like, what are you talking about? And like 1,000 Alpha Centauris. But so if you are a being at a higher level, and you have much more knowledge and insight, you understand things that we have no idea about. And so from that perspective, you don't just see the knowledge of everything, you see the beauty of everything. It's an absolute guarantee that comes with enhanced knowledge. When you have more knowledge, more perspective, more understanding, more power, you see more beauty. And when you see beauty, you love. So higher beings or higher love. It's like the pull of gravity. It's not just airy-fairy for the fun of it. It is for the fun of it, but because fun is a big word in the universe, we often fail to see that, the importance of just fun. But it's not just about fun, it's about love. And when people die and they go over there for a while, almost without exception, like I'm hard pressed to think of the ultra rare cases where this doesn't happen, but almost without exception, without fail, the people who like somehow like separate out and like perceive like the light at the end of the tunnel or something of that nature. They get a little taste of the other, the outside, one could say. One of the most obvious things that is like immediately apparent is that the only thing that really matters at the end of the day is this: love. Like this, that's like the main, primary, and almost the only thing. Well, it is the only thing they care about, because all other things of importance are all a part of this. And they will say to us, like, if you only do one thing in your life, try to just love a little bit. Like, even if it's only one little tiny time in your whole life, try to do that, and then your life will have been worth it if you can like truly love even for a moment, or just be like loving for just like a fraction of a moment or something. That's what they say. They say just try to do that and your life will have been worth it. You might not think so within your life. You might consider your life like a total like write-off, but when you get back, they guarantee that will be able to fill your soul for 1,000 years, or something like that. But and that's why they say that, because of that progression. Because you cannot grow in knowledge and power without growing in love. Those are inseparable things. That's why light and love and knowledge are all highly synonymous, and like darkness and ignorance and hate are also antithetically synonymous, because knowledge and learning and love and all that, it's a connected, graduated scale. But anyway, so that was basically the final point I wanted to make, is that this idea that you would like appease them, any of them, with like sadistic, insane act is just like is just a projection from a damaged mind. That's all that is. And it was a part of the process, for us to make the mistake and to learn the lesson and all that. But there must come a time eventually when we realize that, and it might as well be now. So this was the last point I wanted to make, but I was supposed to make another point in between there, and that is that, so I explained exactly how it is that not only extrasense mediums have their abilities and the plausibility of all that, but also why it is that the rabbis have been so just like weirdly on point for so long. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them, like their prophets, have been very, very adept at things that no one should rightly be adept at, but they have been anyway. And we talked about the covenant and how Abraham transitioned over to like not killing kids but like animals instead, and how that was allowed, why that was allowed, and then how he began the practice of circumcision, and the utilitarian reason that he wasn't aware of, but was why, one of the hidden layers of why that happened and why that was allowed and why that was just a part of the process. And again, It is indeed very brutal, but there's a lot that can be said about that, and like many layers, but just one of them, I won't try to even broach those higher layers to that, but just one of them is that, and I hate to say this because I never like to justify like darkness and bad things, but it could also be that just like those animals and just like those people having death experiences that are being like removed and freed from it, it could also be that those babies are being like, their consciousness is being removed from the worst parts of that experience. And again, that's no justification for doing stuff, but like, if you want to try and like reconcile that with the love I talked about, the love of higher beings, that would be one of the ways you start to see how that becomes reconciled. And I'm only saying this in like a scientific way. I'm not saying this like I'm some like guru and I'm at peace with all this or anything. I'm just like relaying the patterns of research. And so the Jewish people were taken out of Egypt, out of slavery through the Exodus, which if you saw my earlier lecture, I explained 100% of the Exodus and how all of that happened and how all of it is actually super simple and provable and verifiable. And then they were brought to Mount Sinai in the wilderness to mark the beginning of their time of like writing down the Torah and keeping those records and making the practice of keeping records very sacred. And so it was basically, and I'm not going to do this justice, but it was basically their job to like be a light to the world, not exclusively, but like in a big way, to be a light to the world for the future through those centuries that followed that, and to be these people who just held on to this like a pit bull on a tailpipe, like I like to say, just like latched on to this this covenant through thick and thin and through like good times and insanity and so on and so forth, to just like stay like connected to this this commitment and this covenant, and to be the ones who started this thing where they like basically are bringing in this new concept of like trying to convey to the world that this is not about darkness and like killing kids and crazy stuff. This is a whole different thing. This is about like love and protection and being a guardian and having fun and learning, growing, being brave, being strong, like standing up to your fears when you can, all that sort of stuff. It's like, but mainly about love. As corny as that might sound, it's literally, that's the core of it all, is love. And so it was like their job to help bring that message to the world, because they have principles. You might not guess this from the outside, but they have principles like tikkun olam and stuff, where we are supposed to repair the world. They believe that we are supposed to repair the world and to make it beautiful and to make it clean, and they basically invented, not exclusively, but like they are one of like the main inventors of the idea of not allowing animal cruelty. They have it within their charges or their mitzvahs that we should not be cruel to animals and stuff like that, and like we should not kill children. So they've been tasked to like help bring that to the world. And so in order to take on that huge responsibility, they had to sacrifice, because they needed to have people amongst them who could be prophets. But in order to do that, like I said, torture. Like, they had to sacrifice in order to carry that light for the world, you know? Everything is balanced. You know, it's like when I talked about the perfect society, you know, the wealthiest people in a perfect society are also the biggest servants. So everything is like perfectly balanced and beautiful too, and fun. Did I mention that yet? 4 times already? Fun. Our souls are gluttons for punishment. But that's another story. But let's see. So they had to make that sacrifice, and you could symbolize that sacrifice as the bloody destruction of the nurturing energy of their babies. So it's the bloody destruction of the nurturing energy. That's the sacrifice they've been making for about 4,000 years now. And you could symbolize this, if you wanted to veil this and encrypt it so that like its deeper layers were not as obvious until the time was right, you could symbolize this as the bloody destruction of a maiden cow. A cow who has yet to be a mother. So her nurturing energy doesn't even get a chance to happen because she is destroyed through blood. She is made red. She undergoes a bloody red destruction. Or, if you want to put it in another term, I say the maiden. So this can be symbolized through the bloody destruction of the maiden, or the red maiden, or the red heifer. And they have a prophecy of the rabbis that at the end of their exile, they will transition from the era of exile to the era of redemption. And what will mark that transition will be the sacrifice of the red heifer. This was encrypted. This was not meant to be literal, like some other things. They were not meant to be exactly literal and taken on that level. They were an encrypted message. And so this prophecy that in order for them to remove themselves from the era of exile and to move into the era of redemption, that they need to sacrifice a red maiden cow, it's actually referring to the sacrifice which has already been made. And that sacrifice has been them. They have been the sacrifice. I was going to draw this earlier, but I was going to draw a little baby, little hair. So this sacrifice has already been made. That's what I'm trying to say here. The red maiden is the bloody destruction of the nurturing energy. That's what that is. And that is complete. That is done. That has been done. And the second phase of that sacrifice in the prophecy is that the red maiden must then be burnt, a burnt offering. And then the ashes of that maiden must be spread across all the Jewish people. And it's an interesting thing to say from a logistical standpoint, because that means you would somehow have to take the ashes from one single cow and spread that over tens of millions of people. So by the time it would get to you, it would basically be like a little speck. You would just like get your little speck and I guess like, I don't know, put it on your forehead or something. You'd be like, hey, look, I got my little speck. Like, oh, it fell off. And so it's, from a logistical standpoint, that's a bizarre idea that you would spread the ashes of one maiden cow over tens of millions of people. But the reason that's bizarre is because that's not what that means. The destruction and the burning of this sacrifice is the ending of this sacrifice, where the nurturing energy of the babies is put to a bloody end before it even has a chance to occur. This must be burnt and destroyed. Figuratively, it must be ended. And when it is ended throughout the entire culture, its ashes will be spread across all the Jewish people. That's what that is. And that will be the final stage in moving out of the era of exile into the era of redemption, which won't happen all at once. It'll be a process, but that's how you kick it off. And it won't be until that is understood that this will happen. A lot of hardliners will totally dismiss this, but you can go ahead and proceed with just like killing a cow and burning it, but that won't work, and you'll prove my point. Not that this is about me, but it's about the self-evidence of truth. You don't even need me. I'm just like a runner boy. But it won't be until this is understood that the state of exile will truly come to an end. And I know that's like a pretty big, bold thing to say, but hopefully it's really obvious at this point why that is the case. But I was trying to leave it on a positive note. That's why I wanted like that part to come last. I didn't mean it to like work its way backwards like this. But also, until this is understood, if like this is mistaken and just like a red cow gets killed and like burnt up and spread around, it'll actually invoke new lessons that'll help push us to the point where we can realize this finally. And that's never like a fun day at the beach, those new lessons. And I don't know what all that entails, but that's kind of like how this whole thing works, is like there are lessons. That's a big part of like why all this is like this, is because there are lessons that need to be learned in many cases, and one way to keep pushing the envelope until the lesson gets learned is to keep the difficulties coming. We'll just say it like that. So if we learn the lessons quicker, it's less difficulty. So, but anyway, that's the point I'll leave it on. And it even makes sense. Like, why would that not mark the end of a bad era to protect them in the way they need to be protected? Because again, if you deprive them of that sense of security, then they don't advance past that stage emotionally, and they stay trapped. That piece of them stays trapped at that stage. So emotionally, a piece of them is still there, still trapped there. That's part of the sacrifice of it all. And so, there's all these archetypes and stereotypes about, like a lot of these men being like very like paranoid and miserly and very self-centered, like automyopic. That's where that comes from. That like cutting of the security, the comfort and the protection. And now you see why that's been a brutal and necessary thing to happen for this purpose, but there's a price to be paid for that. It's not free, like these poor little babies have been the sacrifice for thousands of years. And there are repercussions, like psychological repercussions. And another dimension of this is that when you're at this stage emotionally, it's all about you. The world revolves around you. And so, not only does the world revolve around you, but you have superheroes looking out for you. I'll just draw some, putting their hands on their, they've got capes. You've got two superhumans looking out for you. There's the way you can tell they're superhuman is that they bring you food. They can lift you up. They're that strong. They can just lift you up like you don't weigh a thing. They're super smart. They know so many things about the world. They can drive a car. They're way bigger than you, obviously. These are obviously superheroes, and they're there for you. And the world revolves around you. And so if you get stuck at this stage emotionally, you continue to feel a lot of that not only does the world revolve around you, but you're waiting for a superhero to come and save you. And it should come as no surprise that this area of the world where this is going on in the culture is like the epicenter of two things. Some of the most ravenous fighting in the world that just never seems to end, and waiting for Superman. And that doesn't mean that they're necessarily wrong to wait for, their guy to come and fix things up. But that's a huge part of why it would be ingrained in them to have that orientation, to be waiting for him or them. It's like 2 or 3 guys, depending on which version, how you interpret the prophecies and stuff. But that's a huge part of why they would have that expectation just locked in from literally infancy, to be waiting for those 2 or 3 guys to show up and save the day. But also what gets locked in is that extreme sense of self, self-importance, automyopia, where it's just all about you. Because for him, this little guy, it is all about him, and he needs to be that way. That's what he needs to be at this stage. It is all about him. But when you have that in an adult, that's when things start to get messy. And some of my earliest memories are hearing people talk about, oh, why can't there be peace in the Middle East, and yada yada yada. And it's like, that's a huge, huge part of it. And it's all connected. Everything is connected. It's all connected. But anyway, that is how you burn the bloody destruction of the nurturing energy. That is how you create the burnt offering of the Red Maiden. You end that practice. You save the baby. And you spread the ashes of that destruction throughout the entire culture. And it becomes a new day.